Now what I'd like to talk about is the newest addition to the Central Management Console. We're on 4.1 right now. This is with SQL Server 2012 install, along with Windows Server 2012, which is kind of a new look, but gives you a lot of different functionality. As you can see, SAP has also rebranded their front page. So when we log into the Central Management Console, we're presented with our system configuration wizard. Now this is, for most people who are on 4.0 right now, the major configuration requirement before you go to production is to configure the adaptive processing servers, which requires an in-depth look at what your content is, how many users you're going to be providing, and what different applications you will be using in the 4.1 experience. This tool is designed as a starting off point to kind of give you a better idea of what those adaptive processing servers should be split out as, how much RAM to allocate to each one of those, and does it automatically. And more importantly, if you do it once on your test system and you have an identical system moving forward with the same amount of RAM and processors and the same kind of user utilization of the tools, then you can essentially export out the system configuration, import it into a new environment, and split it out the exact same way. So it's a great way, especially if you have a clustered environment or you have a number of different nodes, or even if you have just a production, QA, and development environment. All this will allow you to do this configuration once and then move forward. So what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of step through this process and kind of show you exactly how it looks and feels. Every time that the CMC is open, unless you check this little checkbox here, it's going to pop up and say, why don't you come and help do this? So now we're going to go to next. And again, then it's going to come up with a list of the products that you're using, specs analysis right here, Crystal reports. You can integrate your Crystal reports in here as well. Dashboards created through Dashboard Designer, data federation, lifecycle management, which during an upgrade you will most likely be using between your development as you continue to check off reports, to your QA and your prod environment, and then of course the big memory consumption, which is web intelligence. We're going to assume that we're going to do everything except analysis and Crystal reports here and data federator. And we're going to go ahead and click next. But before then, we can also click on these little items, and it's saying which one of the adaptive processing servers and other servers are being utilized by these different applications, right? So you can see that Crystal reports is using both the adaptive job server, which is being used for scheduling and that sort of thing, Crystal Reports Processing Server, which is actually handling the visualization in your browser for Crystal Reports, Report Application Server, which handles a lot of the back-end material, cache servers to speed up your performance, and processing servers as well, which is local content there as well. So let's go ahead and click Next here. And then we're going to say use a slider to select a deployment template for all nodes. We can then dictate where we are kind of fall on this right here. Now, SAP recommends for any environment for evaluation purposes to be at least 16 gigs. That's usually enough if you're doing some light work and you have under 20 users. If you have more than that, there is a sizing calculator which can be reached by hitting either one of these sizings right here, and that'll give you a better idea of what you want to do. I'm going to assume that I'm a major deployment here. I'm going to do 30 to 45 gigs, right? And it's large. And if you could say that it's also detecting how much RAM I have on my machine. So I'm going to go ahead and go back down to 16. It's going to give me a small here, right here. I'm going to click Next. And here's another place where, again, this kind of exporting of your settings comes into play. Because if you need to install your input file or your output file or your log file on some other than a local machine, if you want to do it to a shared drive, you can set those here. And again, this tells us exactly what each one of these are going to do, right? So output file is going to handle scheduled jobs or recurring instances. Input files, that's going to be where all the actual report files that are stored in the repository are actually being held in your data folder as well. This is where temporary files, cache files, all that sort of stuff is going to be stored. We're going to go ahead and set the defaults here. Go ahead and click Next. Okay? And so then it gives us a reminder of servers for these products are currently running right here, which is Analysis, Crystal Reports, Dashboard, Data Federator, Lifecycle Manager, Web Intelligence. After our configuration, we're only going to be running the servers for these following products, right? Dashboard, Lifecycle Manager, and Web Intelligence. And it also tells us that these servers are going to be not available. Now also, it tells us what our capacity is, right? We're going to set the deployment template from extra small, which is under the recommended SAP guidelines, to small. And then also it's telling us that the folders are unchanged. Now you can also click Details here. It's telling us what it's going to do and what it's going to stop, right? And then also here, total amount of RAM, 12 to 16 gigs for processing servers. And then more importantly, it tells us what all the APSs are going to be created as. So core analysis, data, and auditing, and the following servers will be deleted. Now once you do that, you can click Apply and go ahead and apply all these changes to your system. And then you can go into, we're going to go exit out of this, and then I'm going to show you where exactly you can then do further modifications on these servers. So if we go to the CMC, and we go to servers, and we go to server lists, you can see that while we haven't done this, there's a single adaptive processing server that has X amount of RAM. Now when you complete that process, you're going to see a number of different adaptive processing servers here. And you can go into properties here, right? And then in the command line parameters, for those that have done this modification before, you can find the XMG tag here as well. And you can go ahead and tell it how much RAM, additional RAM you may want to do. Now, while this is a great tool to get started, and it can often save, from our experience, 6 hours to a full day of work in configuring these servers, it gives you only a starting place. And so your necessary servers may need more RAM depending on what you're doing more heavily than what was predicted by SAP. Now, one of the other things that we want to look at is that in its nature right now, the CMC has changed, not so much in appearance, but it does have a number of different options, right? It's important to note that in 4.1, user permissions need to be given at both the data connection, universe, and report level for a user to access certain reports with certain connections and universes. We can also set a number of different access levels, and personal folders are a little bit more prevalent here. The other major addition in 4 and refined in 4.1 is called promotion management. This is for those clients that have multiple systems and that they're doing development on a dev server, they're doing QA on a QA server, and they're doing final publication on a prod server. So here what you can do is that you can create a new job, and you can walk through this process of connecting to a source database, right? We would log into our current CMS or from another machine to this CMS. And then we can set a destination either to an LCM bar file, which is the new bar file for 4.0 and 4.1, or we can actually do a live promotion to a new CMS. And what we can do here is we can also schedule it. We can roll back different versions of it. There's a whole number of different options that allow an administrator much easier access to their content and controlling how that content is moved from system to system. We can also look at the Applications tab here, and we can see that there's a number of different tools here. Widgets, which is a part of 4.0 and is now a very interesting part of 4.1, allows you to place widgets on desktops for users so they don't actually have to log into the application at any one time. We can also see web services, web intelligence, and version management. Now, it's important to note for this and others that the SDK has been deprecated to a certain extent for 4.0 and 4.1. The new SDK is based on Rebeans, and it's a RESTful web service. For more information on that, certainly contact us, and we'll be more than happy to talk about what the differences are there.